The group was made up, first of all, of Polar Bear, who you can see there had a gastrostomy fashioned early in the project. Bethan, our researcher, myself, Emily Harrop, Mr. Lee, consultant paediatric surgeon, Tanya and Dylan there in the photograph, two of our involved family members, Siobhan Butler, one of the children's nurses at Helen House, Colette Smith, formerly of Helen House and now of the children's community nursing team locally, Alison Sharrard, and also members of the team at Oxstar. And we'd like to say a particular thank you to the parents involved, so to Catherine, to Tanya, to Sarah and to Dawn, all of whom have shared their expertise to make this project really much more real. And what I'd now like to do is to introduce the context for the work. So many of you looking at, those of you who are present will be working with children with multiple medical complexity in the community receiving medical care at home. And at the very beginning of this, you know, Bethan reflected on what we're asking of those families. And children are surviving longer with increasingly complex needs. And in fact, care at home has moved on from activities of daily living, such as simple dressing changes, eating and washing, to now include monitoring of observations, artificial feeding, intravenous medication, and sometimes things that we would consider to be on a level with life support. And that means that parents are increasingly being asked to do not only traditional tasks done by families, but also the sorts of work done by GPs, traditionally done on hospital wards, and dipping into the sorts of things that would happen on an intensive care ward. Obviously, those are the tip of the iceberg and least common, but still form a significant burden for some of our families. So looking briefly at the videos produced, I'm not going to go through all of these one by one, but just to give you a sense of the kind of areas covered, there's a number of introductory videos. There are advice and tips from families, and these are very genuinely made for families by families. There are descriptions of routine care. There are films on troubleshooting. There is information about the surgery, and that includes the different kinds of surgery available, advice about changing a button, and some specific advice about giving a blended diet through an enteral feeding tube. So that gives you a flavour of what is contained in these films. And indeed, some of the topic came from asking professionals and parents what they felt would most help. So at this point, it's my huge pleasure to introduce Catherine Boyce, who was one of the parents supporting this project, but actually is also a trustee of my own organisation at Helen and Douglas House, to invite her to talk to us a little bit about the parental perspective. Catherine.
Thank you, Emily. This was such an interesting project to work on. I am a parent, I was a parent, and I'm now a professional. And so I was able to view this from a number of different perspectives. So I'm going to start from the very personal to start with. When my son was born, I breastfed him. And when I breastfed him, I had issues, he had issues. So not only could we ring helplines or contact our midwife and then health visitor, but we had NCT, we had an NCT group. So, you know, even 17 years ago, we were having text conversations. And so we could just contact each other and say, help, can you, how do you, what do you do? He's doing this. There was a complete support network around us. If you have a child with a disability who is being fed by tube, the chances of that entire network being there are very slim, particularly in the early days when you first start taking on these different roles and coming fully into the world of the disabled child. So the perspective that Tanya and I brought to the group was, we remember that. We remember that fear of the first time a bottom blocks. But even more than that, we remembered what it was like to do our first feed on our own, when the nurse wasn't there, when you were sat in a room with a child who you had to do these things to that just weren't natural. You know, your hands didn't know what to do. your mind didn't know what to do, and you were desperately trying to remember what it was that you had to do. So the fact that we have produced a set of videos that people can go to at midnight when they're trying to give a feed and it's not going quite right, or when a tube has blocked and they don't know what to do, I think is really powerful for parents. It enables them to carry on being a parent with a support group, no matter what the circumstances. They're not intended to supplant training, they're there to supplement training. So I now manage an organisation that provides care to severely disabled children, and we have been telling parents about these videos, and the feedback we've had is so positive. The fact that they can see complete home situations with real families giving their children real feeds in very obviously real circumstances. So although they've been told how to do this, generally in a very sterile setting, actually seeing the reality of giving a feed in a sitting room with a child that's wiggling and wants to go one way when you want to go the other with feed is very affirming to parents. The other thing I would say, because you're professionals who are likely to be involved in research, some of the points that we made as parents were very different to what professionals had heard before. You'll find that where there's no child available to demonstrate something on, it's usually a teddy bear. And that was the point made, that it can be really scary for a parent who's being introduced to gastrostomy feeding to have it introduced to them as a piece of fake skin with a button going through it. And actually something like a teddy bear is much friendlier and doesn't freak them quite as much. So that's my plug for parental or user involvement in research and these sorts of groups. So I hope you find these videos as useful for your families as we hope they will be.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Lee. For those who don't know me, I'm a pediatric surgeon in Oxford, and one part of my job is to look after patients who may require a surgical enteral device, i.e. a device that will help the child to feed, which in most cases will be gastrostomy. And just echoing what Catherine said earlier, it is a scary moment for a lot of parents. And by the time I and children, of course, for those who kind of understand what's going on. And traditionally, gastrostomy is an operation that we do as part of our job, as I mentioned earlier, but we as surgeons don't really see that very much about what happens before, what happens after, and so on and so forth, because most of these care are mainly done under the community teams and nursing teams, and we tend to do the work of troubleshooting with problems when they arises. And another thing is we also involved with some of the teaching of how to use the devices and so on. But as Catherine hinted earlier, and surely Bethan will mention later as well, is that we don't do it very, very well. A lot of surgeons thought they're doing very well, but in reality, with the time constraints and everything else, we don't really do very well. And hence the development of these videos. And I think for me as a surgeon, I'm very much aware that it is not just a tube that I put it in, be a button, a tube, whatever device it might be. But there's also a child surrounding the tube, and there's a family surrounding the child. And as therefore, the way that I work is very much, it's not just focusing about the tube itself, which unfortunately a lot of health professionals often do. But it's really about the child and the family that we are dealing with, and that we need to support. And traditionally, this is often done as, this is how I do it. I want you to do it the way I want you to do it. But I'm very delighted with the videos when they came out. Are videos very much about what the parents would like to do at home and what they want to do, and we try to do the videos in order to answer those questions. And when the videos were done, I also have very good feedback from them in that some parents, if they have watched the videos already before coming to see me, for instance, in the clinic, they already have some information and some idea of what this is about. And therefore, it means that in the consultation, I can concentrate a bit more on some of the more perhaps surgical or technical aspects of it, or things that are not more technical that needs to be covered in my clinical consultation. And in particular, I think it's particularly useful for parents to see how things are done at home, because whilst I might be an expert in the surgery and perhaps expert in the devices, I will never be expert for the child at home. And the parents are the experts, and I very much rely on their expertise and collaborate with them, so that that I can share my expertise, just like I sharing my expertise with my other medical or other healthcare professionals. With that sort of cooperation and collaboration, I feel that this is the best way to benefit the child and the family. But of course, this is not just about myself with the family. There's also a lot of people in between. So obviously the specialist nurse, we have Alison here in Oxford, as well as other specialist nurses in other centers, which obviously do an extremely important and useful role in these patients. And then the interface between the hospital and the community pediatricians, community nurses in particular, the dietitians, both in-house and in the community, the SALT, the speech and language therapist, and a whole host of team around the care of these patients. And my vision in seeing all this is that this videos is part of the whole process, of the whole package of helping these children for their nutrition needs. I mean, in the ideal world, of course, is they have nothing, but if nothing, meaning no devices. But if they do require devices, then hopefully this will make it as natural, as normal as possible, so that they can lead a life which can be as good quality as it can be, as natural in their own environments as it can be. And as Catherine mentioned earlier, these videos are not training videos. These videos are videos to supplement the training that hopefully we are still doing them. We try to do them within the constraints that we've got. But I think the usefulness of it is that it will just hopefully will build the confidence for the parents, so that when they come to have a child, be it a new one or as a veteran or very sort of experience in devices, they can still help them in those ways. So, so I'm very pleased that the videos are now launched and being used in this way. And a lot of colleagues, I say, in the community are using it, and I do encourage my colleagues to use them as well, whatever environment they are in, so that these can be used in the best as can be. And hopefully in future, we can also change and modify them as according to the needs or the changes in practice. But that's all I have to say. Oh, one more thing I just forgot to mention is about the training boxes. So as Catherine say, it can be quite daunting for some parents if you just put a meat for them to put a device in, and therefore we have Polar, the bear, which hopefully will be less sort of daunting for some children. But we do also find that having hands-on practice is also very useful and important, and for some parents. And indeed, we managed to get a grant with some of these devices, simulation models made up, so that parents can practice. And it has been very, very useful, and I've got very good feedback from the parents that they can actually try putting the button extension on, etc., etc. So I'm very grateful for the hospital charity for supporting that. So that's all I have to say from the hospital perspective.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. So after that, we have Bethan next, talking to us about some examples of videos and showing us some resources.
Thank you, Emily. So what we wanted to do today is show you the actual website and a sample video. Some of you may have been on Oxtar's websites to have a look, but here's just a sample video which illustrates really nicely the interplay between the nurses and the healthcare professionals teaching and the families. So this video features Siobhan, who's a children's nurse, works at Helen House, but also Tanya, who we've worked very closely with, and Dylan. So this video talks about blended diet, so I will just play it now.
Hello, my name is Siobhan and I'm a children's nurse. I'm going to discuss the administration of a blended diet via a gastrostomy. A blended diet is commonly administered via a button which has a detachable extension tube, such as the one that Pola has here. There is an increased risk when administering a blended diet via a peg. This is because if the tube was to become blocked, it's more difficult to replace. If you are interested in starting your child on a blended diet, you should seek advice from the dietitian. They will provide guidance on topics such as appropriate foods to give your child, the volume of food and the time frame for the administration. They will provide continuous support and monitor your child's weight. Please remember to wash your hands before administering the blended diet and preparing food. Some children may be on a blended diet as their sole source of nutrition, or their gastrostomy may be used for top-up feeds. Once the food has been blended to the appropriate consistency, you should draw the blend into a syringe, ensuring that you remove any air and wipe the syringe clean. This will then be ready to administer as a slow push, and any guidance will be provided by your dietitian.
Sausage and some root veg mash and some spinach. That's what's making this green, isn't it, darling? And then we're just very gently going to push this in. Is it going in your tummy? Can you feel it? Yeah? Is it making you sleepy?
For convenience, blends can be made in advance of your child's feed. This should be stored appropriately, either in the fridge or freezer. If freezing the blend, you should defrost it thoroughly before use. A blend can then be warmed in the microwave or a jug of boiling water until it has reached an appropriate temperature, and ensure you allow to cool before the administration. It is important that you follow good food hygiene to ensure food preparation and administration of the blended diet is safe as you would any normal food. A potential problem with administering a blended diet is that the extension tube may become blocked with the blend when you're giving it. This may be because the blend was not blended sufficiently and there may be small bits of food still in the blend. This is why it is also important to sieve the blend. This can be resolved by flushing the tube with a small amount of cool boiled water, or removing the tube and flushing it through with cool boiled water. Starting your child on a blended diet can be overwhelming and exciting, both at the same time. It is important to ensure that you include your dietitian to ensure the blended diet is suitable for your child and to ensure you are following best practice guidance.
Blended diet is really important to us as a family. It means that I'm cooking for my son as well as my daughter. It means that we're all taking part in family meal times together. It's demedicalised his feeding tube. It means it's just another route for the food to enter his body. And it means that I'm in control of what he gets to eat. And that's really important to me.
So that video in particular is one of my favourites because of the interplay with Tanya and Siobhan. And one of the things that I think is unique about these videos is some of them are led directly by families as well as by healthcare professionals. And we carefully thought about who should lead which video and who needed to feature in it. On the website, this is Oxtar's website that you can see on the screen at the moment, there's a list of other information and resources. So on the website, families can watch the videos or they can search for them on YouTube. If you just search gastrostomy and a keyword like Oxford or Oxtar, they appear. But there's also, for example, a little quiz that parents can check their own knowledge and if they're unsure, it takes them direct to the relevant video from that question. There is also a discussion on differences in practice. There are lots of differences in practice, both within a region, within what different families are doing at home and between regions in the country. So rather than trying to say to families, this is the right way of doing it, we've taken the line that the information in these videos has been evaluated by many different healthcare professionals now and families, and it's a safe way of doing things, but it's not the only way. So we've tried to be very explicit with families that there are differences in practice out there. They may see that somebody in their school, for instance, shows a slightly different way of doing things to their community children's nurse and so on. And the different parents on Facebook groups are sharing with each other slightly different ways of doing things. So these is an ongoing conversation, and we very much flagged in the videos that these videos are a source of information, but questions must be directed towards the specialist nurse or the CCM. There's also a suggestion box. So if you have suggestions as a parent or as a healthcare professional for additions or videos that should be created in the future, do post it in the suggestion box. There is also the links to the research papers and the evaluation work that is underpinned this programme of work. On the page here, this is quite a critical page, resources for parents and children. If you go onto this link, you'll actually see a list of resources we've collated direct from families. So parents have said these resources are helpful. So there's some Facebook groups, there's some charities, there's some links, for example, to a very good video produced in Scotland, which discusses the emotional impact of feeding with a number of different parents. There's links to dolls, for instance, and books that parents have used with their children or siblings to explain what a gastrostomy is. So this is just a collation of resources really from parents for parents. This was some of the work that underpinned. So before we started creating these videos, we set out to ask about 150 families what should be in these videos and what did they think of the current training they had received. So you can see that there were quite a number of families that said they were not at all confident or slightly confident, moderately confident. So while some parents did feel very equipped when they left hospital to care for their child's gastrostomy at home, considerable numbers were actually very worried. And when we looked at parents' descriptions of the training they received, they were so variable. There was some fantastic training that parents have received, and there was some very quick, rushed training, often on very busy wards. For example, this family says this, they were asked to describe their training. They said minimal training, was shown once in hospital, observed giving meds and then sent on our way. So there is huge variability out there in the training families are getting. Some of it's excellent, some of it needs a lot more kind of time put into it. As you can see on a busy ward, this easily happens. Parents' recommendations. So we asked them, what can we do to improve the situation? And we found that nearly all parents were agreeing that the face-to-face training with a clinician is extremely and very useful. So this is clearly the bedrock of training. However, about 2/3 of families also said that the videos and simulation training, like Alex showed you with the equipment earlier, would be extremely or very useful, yet hardly any parents reported having access to this as part of their preparation. So we set out to work on the videos and the simulation training. We got families to list topics for videos that they would like made, and we asked them who should be in the videos. They nearly all said it needs to be healthcare professionals and families with real children, not just dolls in the video. They also said that some of the videos needed to be filmed at home to show a real life setting, as Tanya does in some of the videos with Dylan. So we kind of were set up with what we needed from the families, and this project very much started from this early piece of work of what did families think would help. So more recently, we have evaluated the videos. We've evaluated them now with nearly 50 healthcare professionals and 50 families who care for children with gastrostomies. Here's just a few highlights. I'll read this quote out from a family. This was a family whose child had gastrostomy surgery at the John Radcliffe earlier this year, and they watched the videos before coming into hospital for the surgery. And they said, "I really valued both meeting some of the staff and seeing the other families. This was so normalizing and reassuring. It helped us to imagine our lives when our daughter has a gastrostomy button in place. They were incredibly empowering." This sense of empowerment came up time and time again in families' descriptions, feeling that actually they were better informed as well before they came into hospital, before they met Alison, the specialist nurse, or Alex, their surgeon. Families were coming with better questions, and they could rewatch the information as they needed. Of course, when we tell people information, we forget most of what we're told. And that idea that you can rewatch that video as needed is really powerful. And this came out in a quote from a clinician here. So this clinician said, "Parents and carers like to be able to access information in a way that they won't feel judged and that they can rewatch multiple times. Having videos means they will not have to contact the community team or hospital team for simple questions, and this will undoubtedly help to empower them." We got the families and healthcare professionals also to rate a list of statements to get some quantitative data. Now, the videos will be useful to families new to gastrostomy care. 82% of families strongly agreed, and I think the rest ticked agree, and 92% of healthcare professionals. So that's really great feedback. The information in the videos is easy to understand. Again, strong agreement, 100% from the clinicians, and 74% of the families said strongly agree, and most of the rest said agree. So we pitched the information, I think, fairly well, but clearly the healthcare professionals, we never quite make it quite as understandable as perhaps we think we do. The videos will help families to feel more confident. Again, a majority of the families and healthcare professionals indicated they strongly agreed with this statement. I just want to read a few quotes out from parents from this evaluation. "I liked the fact that parents were used as well as professionals to lead the videos. I think the bullet points of the most important information was useful. Good for first-time parents and as a refresher to more experienced parents. Lovely to see the professionals that we know from the hospital involved, as adds comfort. In fact, several people felt like they had met the professionals before they'd actually met them in person because they'd seen them in the videos. It felt like we were having a consultation or conversation in person. Having videos was dramatically better than only having a printed leaflet." So clearly the printed information is something families can look back at as needed, but the videos seem to be a lot more powerful than just having written information. So in terms of how these videos work with the pathway, one of the main aims was to start from what families need and what information they need at the different points in their time journey. So rather than, for instance, just saying we're the hospital team or we're a CCN team, what information do we need to deliver? What training do we need to deliver to families? We said, what do families need right from the initial referral right through to long-term support? And we looked at how the videos might fit within that family's journey, and we got healthcare professionals and parents to feedback on this. So there are different videos, different topics that seem most appropriate from when the child is initially referred to the hospital team for gastrostomy surgery. So there's some videos, introductory videos, there's some information about the surgery, what to expect if the child's having a gastrostomy button or perhaps a peg tube. And there's the useful videos on advice and tips from families, which can be really helpful at this point in early stage in families' journey. Around the time of the surgery, families again can watch the videos about the surgery, the routine care of a gastrostomy, especially just before they come into hospital and while they're in hospital as well. Families can sit with their phones as part of their training and preparation. And again, the advice and tips from families, feeling like, especially with COVID, where families haven't been able to meet up with other parents, to feel like you've sort of almost met another family and heard their story, who've gone through the same surgery, their child has had the same surgery as your child. The first few weeks at home, again, the routine care of a gastrostomy is great as a refresher, and also helping parents feel more confident in the first few weeks at home. The troubleshooting videos, especially when they've been in touch with their CCN team, and they're starting to think, okay, we've got to grips with the routine care, but what happens if the button comes out? What happens if it blocks? What happens if we've got issues with granulation tissue, for instance? And then CCN teams are starting to support families to change a button. So there's a couple of videos from Dawn and her daughter on changing a button, and advice and tips from families again can be helpful. So at the last sort of longer term, families of course can rewatch videos as a refresher, but the troubleshooting videos are particularly helpful. For example, Alison talking about managing granulation tissue. It's difficult to get hold of a specialist nurse in a busy hospital. If you can just rewatch a video from her advice and discuss this with your CCN team, this can be helpful. And blended diet, of course, some families it's suitable for their child to have a blended diet. Some families actually said they liked to watch the blended diet video before the surgery happened to just know that it was an option. So the blended diet video really depends on the family. So before I finish, there's a link here to some of the academic papers that's come out of this work and fed into this work, including a study, interviews with parents who are caring for children with lots of different complex medical needs, as well as gastrostomies, and analysis of incident reports we did, looking at where there were problems in care in the community for children with feeding tubes. And the top reference is the survey with 150 parents we did on their training and support. We want to make sure that these videos and resources are used widely, both within our region and beyond. First of all, this involves everybody in the child's pathway. This isn't just the hospital team or the CCN teams. We of course have dietitians, speech and language therapists, paediatricians, some of the people that Alex mentioned earlier. So really this is part of trying to make a more integrated approach to training and information. So it's very important that everybody who's involved in supporting families with gastrostomies is aware of these resources. The videos are searchable on YouTube, or you can go direct through to Oxstar's website where you can see the other resources as well. Some of you I know have started using some of the videos with, for staff training. Of course, we never designed these to be used for training staff. They were very much focused on families, but they clearly have a role in some circumstances for supporting staff training and can be used for this. Videos can help to standardise practice. So clearly there's lots of different variability in how things are done, and sometimes for good reason. But there is a role, I think, in helping, for example, being able to rewatch Alison's video on overgranulation. You know, that's information that CCN teams perhaps want to just check, what would Alison advise? So there is a role in helping to standardise practice, but we're not trying to completely standardise the way things are done, because there are some variability within our region and beyond. Last point though, actually, is for sharing the videos with families, we have looked at using QR codes which can be easily generated online for free. So it may be that QR codes are helpful and can easily be generated as a way of sharing the videos direct with families, but I think making them searchable on YouTube should also help with that, rather than having to navigate through Oxstar's website.